Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from The Federalist dated August 20th, and it says, "The View can't be both a neutral newscast and a leftist propaganda foghorn." So we're going to go through stuff from everyone's favorite hags on television that are right in front of your screen right now. The amount of misinformation coming from this show is unbelievable, but we're still going to go over it anyway. And I do a lot of my 10 a.m. funnier clip videos are from The View because just the stupid stuff that comes out of their mouth is ridiculous. But enough of me. It says free speech protects ABC's right to run an all left-wing panel every weekday morning. It does not entitle ABC to call that panel a news program when convenient and a protected editorial product when it is not. And by the way, The View is, I believe, and I'm sure the article is going to say it, they are under ABC's news division is what they're considered. So just so you know. It says Disney and ABC walked into a federal courthouse in Washington on Tuesday, and this would have been probably last Tuesday from the time you're listening to this, and asked a judge to save them from the Trump administration. The network's 45-page complaint accuses the FCC of running a retaliatory campaign against ABC for broadcasting content the White House dislikes. In a separate FCC docket, Disney lawyers have spent months arguing that a panel show anchored by Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg is functionally indistinguishable from Meet the Press, which is laughable. And Meet the Press isn't great either, but trust me when I say The View is far worse. It says both arguments cannot be entirely true at once. And after a decade of testifying on fiduciary duty and evidentiary standards, I have developed an ear for a witness who wants the jury to believe two contradictory stories depending on which room they're standing in. And I, of course, is not me, Jason. It is Jay Rogers, it says here. Okay, that is the author of the article, Jay Rogers. It says, that is the real story buried under Tuesday's headlines. The View, for anyone who has never watched it, and consider yourselves one of the fortunate ones if you have not, is an ABC daytime opinion and entertainment program, a politically left-wing panel, it's a far left actually for the most part, where celebrity guests, culture chatter, and news headlines all run through the co-host's strongly held personal views. There is nothing illegal about that. That's correct, they're allowed to have those opinions, for sure. It says, yes, government leaning on a broadcaster's license because it dislikes the coverage should worry every American who still owns a copy of the Constitution. But ABC's own legal position, that this program is simultaneously a target of unconstitutional persecution and a neutral bona fide news program, does not survive first contact with its own guest list. We'll start with what actually happened. In April, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr ordered early license renewal reviews for Disney's 8 owned and operated ABC stations in markets from Los Angeles to New York, years ahead of their normal 2028 through 2021 schedule, the first time in more than 50 years the agency had done that. It's like practically since TV was invented. I know 50 years was, 1976, but I mean, that's still going back to, a while. It says, so there couldn't have been like a 50 years before that because TV didn't exist. That's what I was thinking. Anyway, it says the timing followed a dust-up over Jimmy Kimmel saying Melania Trump had a glow like an expectant widow, and it landed on top of an existing FCC probe into Disney's diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. ABC's lawsuit, filed before U.S. District Judge Lauren Ali Khan, asks for a temporary restraining order and argues the administration waged a retaliatory campaign against ABC for disapproving what it broadcasts. Commissioner Ana Gomez, the lone Democrat on the FCC, publicly cheered the lawsuit, calling the renewal process a campaign of censorship and control. And while I'm not a fan of government necessarily doing this, in the case of The View, it's categorize your stuff right, and this won't be a problem. If you have it listed as entertainment, you wouldn't be having these problems, guys. Continuing on, it says separately, and this is the part most coverage buries. The FCC has spent months examining whether the show is still eligible for the bona fide news interview exemption to the equal time rule, and this is some things I've seen raised as well. The Section 315 provision that forces a station to give rival candidates equal airtime once it lets one candidate on the air. The Media Bureau put broadcasters on notice in January that segments motivated by bipartisan purposes do not get the exemption. ABC insists the show operates just like network Sunday shows, resting on a 2002 FCC letter that has remained untouched for close to a quarter century. It says Congress built the bona fide news exemption in 1959 so no station hosting one candidate would owe every rival equal minutes, which would have turned local news into a scheduling nightmare and discouraged campaign coverage altogether. Lawmakers carved out 4 categories: newscasts, news interviews, documentaries where a candidate's appearance is incidental, and live coverage of events like debates, trusting a broadcaster's good faith editorial judgment over government second guessing. That theory holds only if the programming is doing journalism rather than advocacy with a rotating cast of interviewers, and the guest ledger below makes that call easy. Yeah, because like virtually all of their guests are left-leaning. So here you go. And we're about to see that in just a moment. It's in the next paragraph after the one I'm about to read. It says, here is where the expert witness in me leans forward. If you are going to ask a federal judge to treat you as a martyr for independent journalism, you should probably not also ask a federal jury to treat your panel show as a hard news broadcast while it tells viewers to vote Democrat in the next election, which is exactly what co-host Anna Navarro told her audience on air this year. And there's a link to an article from PJ Media that goes through that, so you can see they're not neutral. It says a Newsbusters count of the show's full 29th season, which is linked there, running from last September through July, found 87 guests expressing a liberal opinion against 5 conservative ones, a split of roughly 95% to 5%. The prior full calendar year was worse, at 128 to 2, better than 98% one-sided, and one of the 2 conservative bookings only occurred because Marjorie Taylor Greene was feuding with her own party's leadership that week. Right, yeah, any Republican that deviates from Trump, like, the view is going to be like, oh no, get them on here, so yeah. But still, 128 to 2, let's just count Marjorie Taylor Greene there. Yeah, it's pretty egregious on the View side. It says that's not a rounding error. It is a programming decision repeated for years by a staff that knows exactly what it is doing. Meet the Press does not have that problem because it functions as a news interview program rather than a daytime rally with commercial breaks. Yeah, Meet the Press, as bad as it is, has people all the time from both sides of the political spectrum, so I have zero issue with them. It says none of that makes the FCC's conduct defensible. I am a card-carrying skeptic of government power, and a president musing publicly about pulling a license because its comedians are mean to him is exactly the content-based leverage that should make conservatives nervous, not gleeful, and I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. As Justice Antonin Scalia spent a career reminding us the First Amendment protects speech we hate as fiercely as much as speech we love, and a broadcast license is not a leash the White House gets to yank whenever a punchline stings. That is also correct. As if the FCC can find a viewpoint-neutral basis for accelerated review, tied to the DEI investigation rather than the jokes, let it make that case on the merits. If it cannot separate the two, it should lose. But conservatives do not have to pick a side between the FCC is right and ABC is the victim here. Both institutions can be behaving badly at once. Government should not weaponize licensing against disfavored speech, and a network dressing up a partisan talk show as neutral journalism to dodge a fairness rule is also misleading the public, just with better lawyers and worse math. Justice Louis Brandeis has had the right prescription more than a century ago. Obviously had, then not has. It's been been a long time. It says sunlight is the best disinfectant. You've heard that saying all the time. It says publish the guest logs. Publish the FCC's actual legal theory for renewal that was not due for 2 more years. Let both records speak, because each side is betting the public will only read the press release its own side wrote. The View was created to showcase women of different generations, backgrounds, and views, according to its own founding premise. Somewhere between Barbara Walters and Anna Navarro, the different views part fell off entirely, which is the network's prerogative under the First Amendment and also the reason its equal time petition deserves the skepticism it is demanding for its own claim. And the final paragraph here says, a program booking political guests at a 95 to 5 ratio is not a discussion. It is a caucus meeting with better lighting. It's a good way to put it. It says free speech protects ABC's right to run an all left-wing panel every weekday morning. It does not entitle ABC to call that panel a news program when convenient and a protected editorial product when it is not. Pick a lane. The rest of us are trying to drive. So, yeah, and like I said, I'm not a fan of The View. And again, like you said, 2 things can be true at once. You can hate the program and think that, they need to have a, as they're listed as a news program, like they need to be more equal with it. You can also say the government is not doing very good there and kind of going after them. But if they're breaking the law, they're breaking the law. It is what it is, so we'll see how this plays out, and I doubt it's going to be reported on anyway. I'm sure they themselves might end up talking about it, because none of them, I think, are, in the actual lawsuit, so they probably can talk about it, I guess. I don't know how that works, but whatever. So we'll see what happens here. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.